Progressivism is a societal cancer. Oh, hi there! Welcome to the Freedom Alternative. Every once in a while, France succeeds in putting totalitarian collectivists in power that manage to either start a silly war or bankrupt the nation, and sometimes both. It's already a long-standing tradition with the French, since it's been a while from the French Revolution, the moment that kick-started this recurring theme in French politics. Last time, before present day, when this happened, was the François Mitterrand administration, which purported to be socialist without being Bolshevik. The success was so resounding that it was eventually revealed that even some cabinet ministers in the French government happened to also be full-time KGB agents. Fast forward almost 30 years, the Cold War is officially over, and we're in the era of tolerance, diversity, and progress, an era which made Frenchmen a minority in their own nation, and an era which also brought the banlieues, which are essentially areas within France where French law doesn't apply and cannot be applied. Also, in the spirit of diversity, tolerance, and progress, the French elected another François Hollande, equally Bolshevik in beliefs with the previous François, but far more open about it. Add to that an obliviously progressive parliament, and you have modern-day France. Ever since François Hollande administration was installed, the direction of the nation has consistently been towards full communism. They first tried a hate tax of 75% to be levied on income that exceeded 1 million euros. The tax was eventually struck down by the Constitutional Court, but not before having thousands upon thousands of French households being taxed with over 100% of their annual income. In fact, if I were to merely list all the idiotic economic policies that France implemented or attempted to implement in the last 3 years, I would need a 2-hour video, but you get the idea. So in this context, the French Parliament, or should I say the French Chamber of Deputies, because the Senate already approved it, is discussing a law that would make it illegal to discriminate against poor. Sounds retarded? Well, that's because it is. But let's read more from the People's Republic of The Guardian. So they title, quote, "France wants to outlaw discrimination against the poor. Is that so ridiculous?" Well, it is, but anyway, carry on. Quote, "In France, it could soon be illegal to discriminate against people in poverty. Under proposed legislation already approved by the Senate and likely to be passed by the Chamber of Deputies, it would be an offense in France to insult the poor or to refuse them job, healthcare, or housing." Similar laws banning discrimination on the grounds of social and economic origin already exist in Belgium and Bolivia, but the French version is said to be the most far-reaching. Anyone found guilty of discrimination against those suffering from vulnerability resulting from an apparent or known economic situation would face a maximum sentence of 3 years in prison and a fine of 45,000 euros. Oh, now I feel much better. I mean, such stunning economic successes like Bolivia and Belgium passed similar nonsense, so it must be a good idea. Belgium is essentially living off the cash that flows through its economy via the EU bureaucracy, because anything remotely close to some industrial production is already banned under the insane eco-Marxist statutes. And Bolivia is a socialist hellhole. So yeah, it sounds fabulous. But wait, the left-wing prick from The Guardian already has an answer to my smirking. Quote, "It is easy to judge the proposed French law as showing the worst excesses of the state or to bemoan the practicalities of how difficult it could be to implement. But most of us are content to outlaw discrimination on the grounds of race, religion, or sex. Is it so ridiculous to add poverty to that list? And if it does feel ridiculous, why is that? Whether it's the discrimination of people in poverty or how governments should respond to it, this is not a problem just for other countries. People think that because we are poor, we must be stupid," says Oriane Chapelle, an unemployed 31-year-old from Nancy, eastern France. Michelle Adobati, 58, her neighbor, who is a single mother with no job and 5 children, said, quote, "I can't stand social workers who tell me they're going to teach me how to have a weekly budget." One study reported by the Times found that 9% of GPs, 32% of dentists, and 33% of opticians in Paris refused to treat benefit claimants who lacked private medical insurance. Doctors say they are reluctant to take on such patients for fear that they will not get paid. Does any of this sound familiar? These are attitudes and even outright discrimination that have been growing in Britain for some time. You can hear it in stories about local authorities monitoring how much people drink or smoke before awarding emergency housing payments, or when politicians respond to a national food bank crisis by saying the poor are going hungry because they don't know how to cook. It is there in the fact that it's now all too common for landlords to refuse to rent flats to people on benefits. Britain is front and center of its own discrimination of the poor, whether that's low-income workers, benefit claimants, or the recurring myth that these two are separate species. Jesus Christ, leftism really is a mental disorder. My gosh. No, you gullible fool. The reason most of the situations you described occur is precisely because of left-wing policies. For instance, a French landlord needs roughly 1 year to kick out a non-paying tenant off his property. In other words, the tenant can live there for 1 year for free. Then the landlord must pay some more in order to maintain the property and sue the state. After 1 more year, eventually the state will reimburse his lost rent, but not the maintenance expenses. And this reimbursement can only occur if yet another bureaucracy approves that the rent required was fair. In other words, rent control and tenants' rights make it a very, very risky proposition for the landlord to take in a poor tenant. Compare it with Romania, which is a comparison I enjoy making because this country has an almost identical legal tradition for the last 200 years, the main difference being that in the last 15 years we went as far away as possible from socialism. In this country, there is no rent control anywhere and there is no such thing as tenants' rights. As a result, finding a place to rent is not a problem at all. At worst, it may take 3 or 4 days if you're looking for a place in a very crowded period. I know this because just last week I looked for a place and it took 3 days because of a massive festival that occupied a significant portion of the housing in this city. Once you found the place and agreed at a price with the landlord, the papers are slim, bureaucracy is non-existent, and you can move into the place in the same day. If the tenant doesn't pay the rent, the landlord can physically evict the tenant in 3 days after the ultimatum. And, quelle surprise, there's far less incidents between tenants and landlords per capita than in France. But of course, the gullible fool who writes for The Guardian didn't even bother to look for the legal context in France and why the things are the way they are. You know, being documented and making a non-emotional argument is part of patriarchally oppressive capitalist privilege, or something like that. Anyway, the article goes on, quote, "Economic inequality cannot survive without cultural prejudice. The media and political rhetoric surrounding the new round of cuts from the benefit cap to child tax credits shows this well enough. Benefit claimants slouch on handouts as hardworking taxpayers toil away to pay for them. Families on benefits should reproduce or breed as little as possible. Benefit sanctions, a system in such dire straits that Ian Duncan Smith's own advisors have warned that it needs to be reviewed, are based on the very premise that the feckless poor need an incentive to get themselves out of poverty. It is reflective of the success of the demonization of people on low incomes or benefits that discrimination against these people could be seen as less damning than when it happens to other groups. Equally, to believe that the poor do not deserve protection from such prejudice buys into the myth favored by our own government. Poverty is a personal choice that the individual deserves to be punished for." Are you fucking kidding me? Seriously. Look, mate, economic inequality is part of nature. People are not the same and therefore do not make the same amount of money. It's not rocket science, really. More to the point, if you are so concerned with the so-called demonization of people on low incomes as you claim you are, you would be the first to demand the abolition of various laws and policies that make doing business with poorer people a risky proposition. If this law were to come into force in France, it would make doing business with poorer people even more of a risky proposition. Just think about it. If you know you risk jail and 1 year salary fine if your business partner, the tenant that is, decides to no longer hold his end of the bargain, what would you do? I know what I would do. I'd ask the tenant his full name over the telephone and Google him to find out if he makes any income. If he doesn't, then I will avoid physical contact with him and try to dispose the evidence that we were ever in any form of contact. You see, that's the thing with all these so-called anti-discrimination laws. One can always come up with a different reason to work around the law, and the cost of compliance isn't really big, whilst the rewards for avoiding the law are sky high, and about to get even higher if this law passes. But let's assume that the law is just perfect and the enforcement will also be perfect, something which makes me laugh out loud, because France and law enforcement should not be in the same sentence. But anyway, let's assume all works out the way the middle-class left-wing pricks thinks it will. Well, what then? Well, we only need to look into the recent history of France to find out. Ever since Hollande took office, the number of families permanently emigrating from the nation skyrocketed. Whereas before Hollande, roughly 15,000 families a year would emigrate, now the average is about 40,000 families. And who can blame them? Tax rates of over 100%, relentless syndicalist legislation and pandering that makes hiring and firing a living nightmare, skyrocketing compliance costs, and the strike culture, all of these are very serious reasons to just pack up and get the hell out of there. If this law comes into fruition, even more people may soon realize that they're better off if they sell their properties or businesses and move somewhere else. Italy has nicer weather and a less bloated economy. London may also be attractive if you're in the financial sector. Poland is also attractive if you're an industrialist. In fact, quite a few French factories were dismantled and moved to Poland in the last 3 years precisely because the owners have had enough of the French bullshit. So yeah, good luck France. Pass more feel-good policies so Europe can enjoy yet another high-scale bankruptcy. It's been a while since we've seen that, and the populace needs a reminder on what happens when leftism is allowed to run rampant. And with that being said, don't forget to click the subscribe button, follow me on Twitter at FreedomAlternate, and consider supporting this channel. By the way, every time you click on that PayPal link or become a patron, a leftist squirms in pain. Just saying. Talk to you guys later. Thanks for watching.